We are recording.
Great. Well, hello and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rebecca Anand. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Infinite Learning. We're delighted that you are with us today for our coaching webinar with Bob Craig. Bob and I have worked together for many years. We were just trying to work out exactly how many years ago it was that he had the pleasure of joining us in Dubai in some warmer climes, because Bob's based in the UK. And we couldn't recall, and we decided let's just leave that there. But nonetheless, we've worked together and had some great successes over the years with our coaching programs. And we've got a level 5 course coming up, and Bob's obviously going to expand on that today. But I just wanted to give you a welcome from myself, from Infinite Learning, and also to introduce and hand you over to Isabel Barnes, who's our Media and Marketing Manager, and I'll let her take it away from here. Hope you enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Rebecca. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Infinite Learning webinar. My name is Isabel Barnes, as Rebecca so kindly put. And again, I'm the Media and Marketing Manager. We are delighted to be running this webinar today in partnership with Bob Craig and Minds Ahead, and we welcome him to speak about the ILM Level 5 Certificate in Coaching and Mentoring. This webinar forms a great foundation for understanding coaching and mentoring. And this training course is perfect for managers, coaches, or any staff with managerial responsibilities. Before I hand over to Bob, a few small areas of housekeeping. Attendees are automatically on listen-only mode, so you can't talk to us, unfortunately, unless you use the chat function where you can ask questions throughout the webinar. At the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session where Bob will answer any questions that you may have had during his presentation. So we will use the last sort of 20 minutes of this webinar to answer as many of these questions as possible. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Bob. Over to you, Bob.
Thanks very much, Isabel. Thanks, Rebecca. Just I'll say something very briefly about Isabel's introduction. Usually it's managers who would take courses like this that I'm going to talk about, but it can be, I've had a conversation with people at the ILM. So if you are a teacher, for example, then you are managing, you might not directly line manage anybody, but you are managing learners, managing an environment, making decisions. So, you know, if you're listening in and you're not actually got manager in your job title, or you directly line manage anybody, but maybe you are working with students on a regular basis, maybe you're a teacher, which I'm guessing quite a lot of you will be, then this course may well still be suitable for you. So you can see my name, Bob Craig. I've been an educational consultant for about 11 years. I set up my own business, and I mainly do teacher training. So most of my work is cultivating learner curiosity, it's classroom practices. But I'm also a trained therapist. So that was really my initial interactions and work with Infinite Learning with Isabel and Rebecca and Paola, because I'm a trained CBT therapist. So I do a lot of work supporting schools and colleges with mental health and well-being, whether that's through training, through consultancy. And I'm also a coach, which is what we're talking about today. And coaching really is probably the thing that knits together all my teacher training, leadership work that I do, mental health and resilience work that I do. Coaching is probably the skill that I use in all contexts, and hopefully can be a really powerful way of working with other people. So very shortly, I'm going to share my screen, but yeah, sat in Chesterfield in a slightly cold office because I'm having building work done, so there's no heating today. But yeah, after the webinar, you're welcome to contact me if you've got any further questions about coaching. If you've got any questions about the actual enrollment process for the course, then Isabel is probably a better person to contact. So I'm going to share my screen. Put glasses on for this important function, screen sharing. Okay, so level 5. So I won't make assumptions. I guess most of you know what level 5 is, but I'm going to talk as if maybe in case you didn't. So level 5 is an undergraduate level course. So it's not, this certificate in effective coaching isn't meant to be a really hardcore academic course. It's much more about applying the skills of coaching and reflecting and doing journals and things like that. So it is level 5, which is an undergraduate level. The ILM, if you haven't heard or come across them before, they're actually part of City and Guilds now, and they are the biggest awarding body of leadership and management courses and coaching and mentoring courses in the UK, and to have a massive international presence as well. So that's my name, the ILM Centre. So the qualification that you will get will be an ILM qualification, but you'll have that name if you eventually obviously enroll and pass the course. It will be Bob Craig Coaching and Leadership, who are the training organisation. So there's not too many slides with words on. So if you're watching on a phone, hopefully some of the text isn't too small, but you can always come back to the slides later. So in essence, coaching is about helping someone to learn, which sounds it might sound an obvious place to start, but sometimes when a colleague, friend, if you're a parent, a child comes and maybe ask for help with something, then what a lot of us do, our default approach very often is to start giving advice. I've got a difficult class, I've got a couple of learners who seem to be not engaging, who seem to be misbehaving, and then someone will roughly explain something, and then we start saying, well, have you tried this? And this is what works for me. And Sarah, she's great at managing learners. It can be challenging. This is what Sarah does. And we sometimes spend a disproportionate time giving advice and sharing our wisdom and knowledge and experience with the other person, where we haven't necessarily spent enough time just probing a little bit to ascertain what is on their mind. How do they perceive the issue that they want some help with? What have they done in the past that's similar to what they're doing now, and can they sort of learn from the past experience? You help people to become aware of choices that are available to them. So I'm not saying there's never a place for telling. Clearly there is in all our roles. Sometimes we can be very directive and very clear and very specific. And why wouldn't we share advice and our experience? Sometimes that's entirely appropriate. But just to make that clear, the default position usually of a coach is to there's a concept in coaching called the beginner mind. It's a sort of philosophical, I think it's a Buddhist concept, and it's really helpful. I usually start day one of the coaching sessions just unpicking that a little bit. And the idea is that if we as a coach start from the premise of a beginner, so we're seeking to understand the other person, even if you've got shed loads of experience in the area that they want help with, then if you start from that perspective of a beginner mind, then you become curious and you seek to understand. Because sometimes we half hear something and we go straight into advice mode. So I don't want to belabor that point anymore, but that is one of the distinguishing aspects of coaching. It's very much about helping that other person to gain clarity and to empower them to take steps, rather than us telling us what we do, and the other person listens and smiles and goes, oh yeah, that sounds really helpful, that sounds great, and then often nothing happens afterwards. So coaching helps people appreciate how prior learning, I've alluded to that, relates to the current situation. Solution focused is a word that's used a lot in coaching, and probably one of the most common and highly respected schools of coaching is called solution focused coaching. And it's not that we never explore problems. It's not that sometimes it is appropriate to fault find and to ask people, why is it difficult and what you're struggling with, and all these things can be useful, but essentially most coaching tends to be solution focused. So it's about accepting the current situation, even if we don't like it, just accept the reality of where we are. I'm new to job. I'm doing two people's work at the moment and I'm not sure where to start. I've been given a project and it's not quite going to plan. So people come to you as a coach and we try to be solution focused. We try to map any prior learning to the current situation, and it's very goal oriented. Some people who misunderstand coaching probably think we just put our heads to one side, listen, reflect back what the other person's saying, and say excellent a lot. Okay, excellent. Yeah, I understand. But coaching can be, we're sometimes challenging the other person we're challenging their assumptions, we're challenging their patterns of thought, their procrastination behaviors, their, not sort of wagging fingers at them clearly, but we want that person to become aware of what the reality of the situation is, what they're doing now that maybe isn't having an impact, and what else they could do to make progress. I quite like this last bullet point, linking the internal words and narratives of an individual or team with the evolving external environments. So, when we're working together, that's a sort of sentiment that we would really unpick a little bit. But this webinar really is just me talking for half an hour, just exploring what coaching is and telling you a little bit about the course. So obviously I don't normally teach like this, listen to me. But I really like this, the internal words, worlds and narratives. We all tell ourselves stories all the time, sometimes subconsciously without becoming aware of it. We make sense of the world, we make sense of our past. We try and visualize or think about where we want to be next. We explain events that have happened. We explain how other people, why were they a little bit sharp with me? Why were they disrespectful? And sometimes these narratives that we tell ourselves, sometimes they're spot on, absolutely, that's how it is. But other times, for a million reasons, our own unconscious bias, our own conscious bias, our own, all sorts of issues that we'll explore in the course. But the stories people tell themselves sometimes are not enriching, they're unhelpful, they sabotage our goals. So as a coach, that's what I mean by the beginning mind. We really want to help that person understand the internal world, their thought processes, their explanations of things that have happened, and try to marry that with the evolving situation. Practically every minute of our life, but certainly within each hour, there's things that are unexpected, there's uncertainty. We're in the COVID, hopefully come to the end of that, but that's very much been about new situations, uncertain environments. So that's what we do as a coach, in essence. And as Isabel said at the end, if you've got any questions as we're going along, if you could type them into the chat, and then Isabel will feed them to me at the end in about 25 minutes time. So some of this I've already made reference to, but as a coach, we help people to slow down, to take stock of a situation, to critically reflect sometimes, to focus, prioritize, and with resources. The resources can be that individual's own skill set, their character traits. It can be their things they've done in the past, to helping someone to remember things that they've done that could be helpful. Let's face it, especially when we're a bit stressed and busy, and maybe multitasking and bouncing from one thing to the other, we often get into poor habits of behavior. We often go into default ways of thinking and acting and so on, and we forget, maybe something that was done recently that really worked well. And so a coach is trying to help people, and the resources can be other people and physical resources and online resources. So in other words, who can help? Where can you go for help? What's your priority at this time? What's the smallest step you can take? How is this going to help? Exploring benefits is about recognizing the benefits for you, for the person that you're working with, benefits for their school or organization, benefits for the students that they work with. Sometimes that's obvious and you don't need to necessarily explicitly focus on that if what they've said, but if not, people often lose heart a little bit and maybe have good intentions but don't translate those ideas into actions because they're not crystal clear in their own mind what the benefits are. I've been told to do something and I'm going to get on with it, but I might not give my full self to this because I'm not clear what the benefits are. Stop Start continues, one of many coaching models that we would look at on the course. It's a great way for an individual to reflect. It's a great way after a project for staff to reflect. It's a great way to get students to just if they've just, even a short activity, what is it that didn't work so well? Where did you give your time that maybe wasn't a productive use of time? Obviously, if you're working with young children, you wouldn't use this sort of language, but what's not working, what's not productive, what's ineffective. And then the start aspect of this model, I think it's probably fairly obvious, but it's about what might work, who does this well, could you try that? What's the smallest step you can take in the next 24 hours? These are sort of coachy questions to try and, inspire people a little bit, but to help them to become aware of what's in it for them, to take some sort of new action, to step out of the comfort zone. And then to continue, you may now have put that in bold, because this is one of the hearts of certainly solution-focused coaching. It's to recognise what you are doing, and how you are thinking, and where you are focusing that is working. You might need a tweak here and there, but some things just they are working. So often we look for areas for development all the time, and things that we can improve, and continuous professional development. Which is, I get all that. That's how I earn my living, through CPD training. But sometimes it's just about being at peace and recognizing what's working and continuing to do these things that are having some sort of positive impact. So, as you can see, I could have done, I have got lots and lots of other slides that were similar sort of things, just to emphasize that. Think about how valuable it would be working with each other, being a manager of others, working with students, working with parents. If you can help that other person, whoever it is, to make smarter, more efficient, more helpful decisions, move towards something rather than just, a lot of people know what they don't want. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to have to go through that again. I don't want this. I don't want that. And it's quite just a powerful sort of shift. Recognizing that, of course, we don't want pain and discomfort, and we don't want to. But sometimes people haven't really internalized what they're working towards and what they do want. So hence the Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland image. Some people, most of my work is with older learners, so 14 to 19-year-olds. That's my sort of background as a teacher, as a manager, and most of the consultancy I do now. But it equally applies to primary and secondary school children as well. But sometimes people think that they don't act, they don't start something, they don't make progress with something because they're petrified of making the wrong decision, or they're a perfectionist and they think, I've got to get it just right. And at the moment, I'm not absolutely clear what to do next. I know where to start. And we talk ourselves out of doing things because we think this wrong decision idea is going to lead to thunder and lightning and discomfort, difficulty. And equally, some people sort of maybe start off with something, and then when you hit a barrier, the resilience sort of, if people aren't emotionally resilient, they give up quickly, or triggers some sort of anxiety or other, mental health difficulty. So what, as a coach, we're helping people to realize that, what is the direction of travel? What is the first step? Try and maybe visualize what they'll notice when they have achieved the goal, but also recognizing that along the way there will be, bumps in the road, to continue that metaphor. There'll be potholes, there'll be dodgy drivers coming the other way at you, there'll be all sorts of challenges. So there's no such thing as a perfect decision. There's no such thing as a completely wrong, because often we can, and if there is, you can backtrack to the crossroads. You can change the context through certain actions, so the thunder and lightning dissipate. You can, I think you get the idea, I'm sure. I don't want to labor it too much, but coaches help people decide. And this image on the right, one of my favorite, and it's quite commonly used in business and in education, is this idea of the aggregation of marginal gains. The aggregation of marginal gains. British cycling and rowing became sort of world beating on the back of that premise. A lot of other elite sports certainly do it, but also in business and in other contexts, that if you can start with one small improvement, spend 20 minutes doing homework rather than 15 minutes doing homework, try to make notes in a slightly more effective way, or whatever the issue is, just minor adjustments, lots of little 1% improvements over time accumulate to 3%, to 5%, to 10%. And that not only means a noticeable change for the people that we're helping, but also it builds confidence, momentum. And so again, as a coaching, if someone comes to you with a problem and we start just saying, well, you could do this and this is what I do, and start just talking at them, really, then you're not really tuning in with what they already know, what they don't know, what is the start they could make, and how can they begin to make these couple of 1% improvements that can very quickly create that momentum that we want. And bottom right, another image that I really like, there's a quote that I usually accompany with this, what's the point of teachers, or what's the point of educators when in the world of Google? And obviously you could add YouTube and everything else, all the other sources of information, but what's the point of teachers in the Googleverse? And when, obviously that elicits a discussion of what, and not just teachers, learning support assistants, teaching assistants, anybody who helps other people to learn. What's our role? It isn't just to disseminate and pass on information. It's to help people to make connections between information and recognize what's more valid than others, and what's out of date, and what's completely skewed and biased, and all these other factors. And this is, why coaching can be a great tool for giving feedback to students. It's a great tool for facilitating group contexts with staff in team meetings, with students in classroom and other contexts. And when we do ask powerful questions, and we do ask some of the other coaching tools and techniques, this really moves towards the right-hand side of this image, where people begin to really get that deeper understanding, promoting the long-term memory, and the people really sort of make the connections for themselves, because we're taking just a little bit more time to probe and to elaborate, and to sometimes ask hypothetical questions so they can use their imagination, and sometimes ask evidence-based questions. Is this an instinct or an impression that you've got, or is there evidence? So there's a million coaching tools, not a million, that's a bit of an exaggeration. There's hundreds of tools and techniques that we use in coaching that hopefully create these 4 key areas, not just for learning, but for well-being, for emotional well-being, for life, eventually for employment contexts, and so on, being a citizen. I'm not sure the government always want people to be, they get too political, any government possibly, but certainly at the moment they necessarily want people to be critical thinkers, and to, we get bombarded with information, and we're meant to just abide by the 3-word slogan and whatever information is. But we want our learners, we want ourselves to be a little bit more aware and digitally literate and critically aware, and coaching, I would argue, is one really valuable way to do that. So, who can coaching help? If you're unmuted, I'd ask you to comment on these, but I'll just quickly tell you, we wear different hats: teachers, managers, support staff. Very few people have actually got a job, and that's pretty much what they do. And sometimes, as a coach, we help people to just become aware of what. If you remember that one of the first slides with the chevrons, one of the things we do is slow down, take stock, prioritize, focus on one thing at a time, ideally. Not always possible. Sometimes got to do the bottom right image, the woman, they're multitasking. Sometimes that's just all we can do. But when we don't need to do that, multitasking is actually a drain on energy. It's inefficient time-wise. It's not the best way to achieve goals, because the brain is, I do this really good exercise. If I say so myself. I do a very simple task where I ask people to write 1 to 20 in numbers, and then I am a great multitasker as a sentence, and everyone does it effortlessly within 15-20 seconds. When I get them to switch, you write 1 on the top line, then you write I on the bottom, then you put A for am, and then you write 2, and then you put M for am. So you just do this, you end up with the same result, but people are switching from numbers to letters. Really simple task. Most people take 3 times as long. They make mistakes. You know, you can see these bright staff members struggling to write 1 to 20 in I'm a great multitasker, because the brain has to keep focusing every time you change from one thing to the other. So coaching helps people to focus, to prioritize, to take action, to make appropriate decisions. To, if you are procrastinating over something, that's the notice board image there. Do it now image. I do really interesting. There's some great TED Talks and do some really good, interesting work around procrastination. Most people do it to some degree. Sometimes it's not a problem. We get a deadline, the deadline approaches, and people sort of usually get the job done fairly well. But there are times when procrastination isn't an effective tool, and we explore that, and we explore how coaching can help people to overcome that. Bag of frazzles, being frazzled is a psychological term, and it's not coach. Sometimes people think coaching is a default approach. You know, you're on some sort of HR capability program and you get sent for coaching, or you know, if people you've had an observation of some, you know, workplace observation or a lesson observation, and you get, it's not, the lesson doesn't go great, so you get sent to coaching. You know, some organizations use it in that way, but it really has an impact. If people don't want to be coached, it won't work. They'll just sort of sit there and at best be compliant, and at worst push back a little bit. So coaching works not just as a default, but it works with all staff, people who are really high achieving, highly motivated. You know, most senior leaders in organizations, well, certainly in the UK, most sort of CEOs and most head teachers and principals of colleges and so on have some sort of coach, and it's usually external coach. And I'll skip Homer.
Yeah, and I'm not easily impressed. Wow, a new car with a couple of...
So just a little extract from Homer being easily distracted. He probably needs a coach. Coaches help other people to overcome some of these things, to step out of the comfort zone. Remember what we said, do more of what works. Often it's perfectly reasonable and fine. Not everyone can be a superstar or wants to be, or wants to give their life to work. So some people do a decent job, but even people, you know, who are doing an okay job still sometimes would benefit from approaching a situation from a different perspective, from doing it in a different way. And what a coach will try to do is to explore the options, to encourage people to take that chance, to accept there'll be a little bit of discomfort and a little bit of imposter syndrome, or a little bit of whatever it is, frustration, because they're doing something new for the first time. But often, as we know with students, if they're only doing things that they can already do, they're not really learning very much, if anything. So people need to have that conversation about uncertainty, about doing things differently, about comfort zones, and there's some nice little coaching tools to do that. There's lots of different types of unconscious bias. So there's this one example of confirmation bias, which you maybe, in essence, is that most people are drawn to sorts of information, are drawn to people who are like them, who can confirm their existing worldview, the values, the biases we've got. And that's normal. Everyone does that to some extent. But what we would do as a coach, if we sense that is the thing that's limiting the other person, because they're not really looking at situations from a different lens, through a different set of spectacles, you know, whatever metaphor, standing in someone else's shoes, trying to empathize. So confirmation bias is one of many types of unconscious bias: blind spot bias, outcome bias, negativity bias. There's dozens of them, where a skillful coach can help that person become aware of their own blind spots, of their own biases, to you know, if they want to shift in an area, first of all, you've got to become aware of what you're doing. Closed mind's an obvious one. Learned helplessness, I think, is an interesting one. It's actually a psychological concept. Often people learn to be helpless through experience, through maybe difficult upbringing factors, where either they've been overprotected or you know, ignored or neglected in some way. And that's where a lot of you guys come in, especially if you're primary teacher. The actual essential nature of having adults, ideally also it happens at home and the parents, but sometimes the reality is it doesn't. But anyway, people learn to be helpless. They learn to victimize themselves. They learn that to protect themselves sometimes, that blame other people. So what we try to do as a coach is develop sort of more of a constructive approach to situations, problem solving approach, building resilience, recognizing that whilst we can't always completely change the situation we're in, we're not helpless. There's different ways we can think, there's different ways we can make sense of things. So this is where I mean, coaching, this sort of straddles a little bit sometimes some of the skills of counselling and some of the focal areas of counselling, but there are clear boundaries, and we talk about that on the course, and we talk about disclosure and boundaries and ethics within coaching, and when it's not appropriate. But that idea of learned helplessness, personally, I found it tragic. I found it so sad, and one of the saddest things when a child, an adult, tells themselves that in most, if not all situations, that's just how it is. There's not much they can do, and you know, so coaching can help people to become aware of the alternatives and fear of the other. You know, some people have a fear of people who are different from them, different colour skin, different religion, different ways of looking at the world. And what we try and do as a coach is to understand, you don't always have to agree with everyone. We don't always have to sort of, you know, spend hours and days, but just having that basic premise of not fear of the unknown, and seeking to understand other people and trying to respect their otherness, their difference from you, in order to have productive relationships with them, work relationships, student relationships. So I hope I'm not waffling too much, and I hope saying it's a bit strange when all I'm looking at is a green dot without getting that feedback. But I hope some of these ideas are landing and resonating with you. Obviously, we'll look at the how on the course. This is just giving you a sense of what coaching is, what it can do, and yeah, this slide, we've already touched on a lot of these ideas already. I'm just looking at my clock. I've got about 5 minutes left, so I'll just leave this slide up for about 20 seconds so you can cast your eye over it. It's hard to think of many, and I don't want to overclaim. Coaching is not the answer to everything. All you need to do is coach, and then you'll be resilient, you'll be critically thinking, you'll be mega creative, and all the rest of it. Clearly, you know, it has to be done well, and it's still, there are limitations, and it often doesn't work, especially if the other person isn't engaging. But it's hard to think of too many of these circles: decision making, progress, creativity, mental health, and well-being, where that are important to a young person's development, to staff development, to just looking out for each other, basically. So in each of these sort of areas, this is, you know, we'll do role plays and exercises, and I'll encourage you to think of your own situations where, you know, these sort of factors relate, and then you'll be coaching each other. If you do the course, obviously you coach each other, and I'll be there to give feedback and so on, to try to refine how you help other people make decisions and think critically and so on. Curiosity is one of my personal areas of research. I'm meant to be writing a book. I've got 30,000 words, and I keep procrastinating a little bit. Maybe I need a coach, but the idea of what is curiosity, how can it help in learning, life, and well-being context? I think it's so fascinating. The idea of just seeking to open yourself to different ways of being, to different viewpoints, trying to get that sense of wonder and having that courage to experiment and engage in trial and error, and how curiosity is often associated with, you know, taking a few managed risks and accepting the unknown. And so it's a really powerful, and coaching can, through the questions that we ask and through the way that we interact with other people, instead of the other person closing down and being a bit passive, because coaching is the opposite of passive. You're probing people all the time, even if, and sometimes if someone's completely blank and they're not responding, or they've got no prior experience, we can come in and suggest a few things if we've got that knowledge ourselves. But then you step back again into coaching mode, so the person makes sense of the ideas you've been sharing with them. Okay, so I think I've got 2 slides left, if that's okay, but I just wanted to I don't expect all of these things to be of interest to everybody or to know about them, but these are just, when we mention coaching, if you haven't studied or thought too much about coaching before, it's just to be aware that there's lots of different, slightly different approaches, focal points. Like cognitive behavioral coaching is sort of obviously borrow some of the tools and techniques from CBT. You know, the importance of how our beliefs and our emotions and our thoughts are connected up, and some of the strategies associated with CBT are relevant to coaching, even though the context might be a bit different because we're not therapizing, we're doing different things. But narrative coaching I alluded to, with the helping people to become aware of the stories that they tell themselves and each other. NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, you may or may not have heard of. The key there is the P of programming. How do people's thought processes and the language that they use create habits, programs, and helping people become aware of which habits are enriching and enhancing, which habits less so, and then helping them to change the habits that are sabotaging them and limiting them in some way, etc. Emotional intelligence, you'll come across regulating our own moods, being empathetic to others, for example. And we'll look at ethical. So there's a code of conduct within coaching, a bit like with other professions like counselling and so on. There's codes of conduct, there's ethical dilemmas, so we'll explore those in the sessions, etc. So there's just a list of some approaches and schools of coaching. And then finally, apologies for the size. I wanted to get this on one screen. I don't expect you to remember much on what I'm going to say anyway about this, but I just want to give you just a very top level overview of the assignments that you'll be doing on the course. So there's 3 assignments. The first one is, as you can see, it's like a mini essay. So you'll have 12 assessment criteria that are, obviously they're connected, but you can answer them individually. What is coaching? What's the business case for coaching in organizations? Why do we do it? What are the skills of a coach? So it's not terribly challenging, but you are expected to do some research and to integrate that within your own thoughts and so on. Unit 501, you will have to coach 18 hours. So even if you're applying your coaching skills with learners, with students, then for this course, you have to be, the 18 hours have to be accumulated by coaching staff. You don't necessarily have to manage them. You can, those of you who come onto the coach, you can peer coach each other, but it has to be real. It's not making up scenarios. It's actually having a real work issues. Most, put your hands up, it's a bit silly, no one can see, but everyone's got something. There's something about our work that maybe we haven't quite achieved, that we'd want to, that we haven't made progress with, that we just want to look at something a little bit differently. So you'll coach 2 or 3 different people, 18 hours in total. So that's roughly 6 hours with 3 people. And then you'll do a coaching diary, and you'll reflect on the methods that you've used, which bits worked, which bits didn't land as well as you'd hoped, and you'll get feedback from the client. So there's a little bit more to it, but in essence, Unit 500 is an assignment, Unit 501 is doing the coaching, reflecting on it, and Unit 503, you do this last. That's like a summative appraisal. So having done the course, having done the coaching, having done a bit of research, this is my self-assessment as a coach. Here's my action plan for the next 12 months to continue my learning and development. So I'll just stop talking for 20 seconds because some of you might be trying to read the screen as well, and you'll get these slides obviously, but I'll just have a little 10-second break now. Okay, so I'm going to go back to not seeing the screen, seeing me, my face on the screen now, and then Isabel will feed any questions or make me aware of any comments that you've put into the chat facility.
Thank you for that, Bob. That was really, really interesting. Yeah, I'll just give everyone a few minutes for any questions in the chat that they might have. I certainly never knew that there were so many different styles of coaching, so I feel like my eyes have been opened there. And I actually have a few questions of myself, if you wouldn't mind.
I'd love to, yeah. Thank you.
Just so fascinating to me. So do you think coaching is now more important than ever because of COVID and like the uncertain situations that everyone's been thrown into?
I think uncertain is a great, fascinating concept, isn't it? I mean, the world is always uncertain before COVID. Change, happens. That's the nature of being a human, isn't it? Other people change, we change, experience changes us. But I think the premise of your question, Isabel, I would agree with that there has been so much uncertainty. People who thought they were really effective in their roles all of a sudden aren't quite as clear what's expected of them because the learning has been maybe completely online or blended, or so I think there is definitely, and one thing I didn't mention today that talks to your question there, Isabel, is self-coaching. So by learning some of the skills, the tools, the techniques associated with coaching others, I would argue that maybe even the most important person to coach is ourselves. So when we are in uncertain times and feel a little bit out of depth or not sure what to do next, or maybe we've made mistakes and we're a bit embarrassed to, well, that's life, isn't it? So the way that we coach ourselves can help us to get through those self-doubts and that uncertain context that you mentioned.
I think you've actually just answered my next question there as well, which was, do you think that coaching can help, learning to coach others can help you help yourself? So you just sort of skipped ahead to that one.
Well, I've got a slide in mind that I often start with when I'm looking at this, and I can't remember the exact word, but something like tuning down your inner critic and turning up your inner coach. So that some people are really aware of their inner critic and the way that they talk to themselves, and can be really quite hard to ourselves in a way we're not to others. Other people, that's less of an issue, but subconsciously, there's always stuff going on, and what we put into our brains and how we make sense of things has a big impact. So if you can try to just dial that down a little bit, and there's some ways to do that, through adopting some mindfulness practices, some coaching techniques, and then dial up your inner coach to make sure if you're catastrophizing and making more out of an issue than actually is the reality, which is what we do with other people, we do to ourselves as well as a coach.
And those techniques and skills that you've mentioned, that's something that you'll be running through on the actual course itself?
Yeah, I mean, the coach is a bit of a dream for someone like me because I'm interested in all these areas, and there's not much actual prescribed knowledge that people need to know. You know, it's the basic skills of coaching are listening, questioning, summarizing, paraphrasing, and some one or two other things. But what adds value, and hopefully blow my own trumpet, what I try to do anyway, I can integrate my learning from CBT, from NLP, from leadership, from just being curious myself about learning and self-development. So all these things come into the course that when I'm delivering coaching course. Yeah. It's a bit strange talking about yourself and giving yourself a pat on the back, but hopefully I'm reasonably good at training and I'm interested in things.
That's all you need. Just, it's like I always say, be interesting and be interested, and just go from there, I think.
I'm going to nick that. I'm going to write that one down. That's a good starting point for coaching, for being a coach. Be interesting and be interested. Yeah.
I nicked it off of my uni lecturer, so he'll be glad that it's spreading.
Thank you. What do you want to say something about, Isabel? You're probably going to do this anyway, but about what people do now if they're interested in either applying for the course or.
So you've just stolen the words right out of my mouth there. So if anyone is interested in applying or booking onto the ILM Level 5 certificate in coaching and mentoring, you can visit our website at infinitelearning.ae and search for it on there and book onto it. Alternatively, you will be taken to our webpage after this webinar ends, and you can look through all of the course details there if you are interested. And you can also drop me an email. My email is Isabelle, ISABELLE, @infinitelearning.ae if you've got any more questions or queries about the course itself. Because I feel like a lot of the time you end webinars and then that's when people get their questions come through, you know. So if you are interested, please do drop a message or take a look at our website page to find out some more information. So I think that just about concludes our webinar for today, unless you've got anything else to add, Bob?
No, just I guess we need to talk, probably not do, but we need to just agree exactly the dates, and I think there's some proposed dates, but we need to, if you guys are interested, then it will definitely run this course, and it's really then about trying to find a model of delivery that works best for you, whether that's completely online or whether we try and have at least some element in person. So if you're interested, then please make that expression of interest known so that we know that it's a viable group, and then we can nail down the details of the actual, the dates and things like that.
Yes, we do have a poll running, which everyone should be able to see, which you can vote for your preferred delivery method, whether you prefer online learning or whether you prefer face-to-face. And from that, we will take your feedback and decide how best to move forward with the course. So thank you, Bob, for sharing your passion, knowledge and expertise with us today. And thank you to all of our attendees for joining us. A video recording of this webinar will be sent to you afterwards, along with a copy of the PowerPoint that Bob has very kindly provided us today. And we'll be very, very grateful for your feedback. So if you are interested, the course itself is called ILM Level 5 Certificate in Coaching and Mentoring. So please do visit our website to find out more information there. Until then, thank you once again to Bob and Minds Ahead, and we hope to see you all at our next webinar.
Thank you, Isabel. Take care, everybody.